Good morning, friends, and Merry Christmas to you all. I'm so glad you were able to join today online. I'm glad we have this time together. And I want to, as always, encourage you to share your comments, your thoughts, and even your questions online throughout this time. It is intended to be a live community. I hear plenty of myself talking. I'd love to hear from you, to hear your thoughts and your ideas and everything, your questions. And so please pray with me. Gracious God, thank you that we can gather like this. We ask that you would teach us and lead us in your ways. Amen. And so I got to share with you a few things. First of all, it's important for me to tell you that we will be holding worship on Christmas Eve, but only in person this year at 4 p.m. at Coon Rapids UMC. If you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you. I apologize for shifting away from online on Christmas Eve, but it really does get to be hard for me and my family. So I hope you will join us in person on Christmas Eve at 4 p.m. Also, I want to let you know, it's very important that you hear this. All Spirit of Matthew 25 events, including the Friday food giveaway, they never close. We never stop. We can't close for the holidays. If we did, we don't know what we would do with all the food. It has to go somewhere, and we have plenty of volunteers to make it happen. That being said, if you'd like to volunteer for any of the Matthew 25 events, please do contact Tammy because she is the best resource for getting connected with those things. The other thing I want to share with you that's very important and very relevant today, and I've been, of course, thinking about it all week, and it has informed a lot of what I want to share with you today, is that last Sunday after church, we realized that something had happened last Saturday through the night. Our bread box that we have outside, right out my window over here, our bread box had been broken into. It had been, the lock was cut by some very, very strong pair of cutters or something like that, and people had gotten into the bread box and stolen the meat that we were keeping out there, that we were saving up for our drive-through. So all month we save up certain types of proteins to give away at our drive-through. We've been doing that for a few months now, and it's amazing to be able to do it. But it got robbed last weekend, and I gotta tell you, we had every emotion you can think of. I mean, just frustration and anger, and now what do we do? And, if we can't give away protein for a drive-through, that's okay. I mean, we only can give away what we have. We don't really have a lot of money to go buy much of anything. But it was still just so painful to think about that. I mean, we don't know why somebody would do that, either out of, frankly, desperation, maybe, in which case, okay, or greed, in which case, I don't know, if you're greedy enough to steal from a food shelf, that's kind of desperate, actually. Either way, to me, after having thought about it for 24 or 48 hours, the only correct response is grace and love. It doesn't mean it's okay, but I think love is the cure for either the desperation or the greed. And so Friday night, when I was sharing announcements with the Friday food giveaway volunteers, I shared with them what had happened to the bread box. And most of them knew because they get the emails, but some of them didn't because they're just not email people, or they didn't read their emails, or they aren't signed up for the emails. And so that's my little note right here. Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. If you would like to get information about what's going on here, through our Friday updates and other things like this, reach out to Tammy. She'll add you to the email list that you want to be a part of, okay? Anyway, some of the volunteers hadn't heard about this theft. And granted, some of the volunteers that we had last Friday night, as most weeks, were brand new to us. So we were just meeting them for the first time. And so we talked about that. And I shared with them that from a leadership standpoint of Matthew 25 and also from the church, grace, in so many words, grace was the right response. Whether they were desperate or just greedy, we don't know. But either way, love is the answer to that. And then I want to share with you what happened on Friday morning. Actually, I think it was Friday afternoon, right around 1 o'clock. Because we were worried about what to do about protein for that drive-through. Some people actually donated money to help, like replace the lock and all that, which we've done, right? But on Friday, we got a call from Hy-Vee and went to make a pickup. And Kent and Wendy and Ken came back with 3 carts full of peanut butter. Guess how many jars of peanut butter? Just over 400, which is exactly what we need to offer a protein source. Now, peanut butter is not the best protein source, but 400 jars of peanut butter is exactly what we need. Good morning, Jan. See, I think God has an interesting way of working in this world. Love has a way of coming around. And in our loss of the protein items we had been saving for the drive-through, somehow 400 protein items were provided the following week. Always choose love. Always choose grace. But the reason I really wanted to share this with you today is for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that on Friday there was a volunteer who was so shocked by how we were talking about this theft, offering love, offering grace, whatever the motivation of it was, that they grabbed me by the hand and they held my hand and with tearful eyes said, "Unbelievable. I can't believe it that you would offer any kind of kindness or grace to whoever this thief is. Unbelievable that we just go on and we just keep loving and we just keep doing things like that." And this volunteer was just absolutely shocked that that's how Christians would respond in this kind of scenario. Respond with hope. Respond with, it's going to be okay, with peace, and ultimately still love our neighbor in the same way. Just keep going, persevere, don't give up. Don't be dragged into the negative, just go. This volunteer was shocked by that, and this is something important for you to know. Even among our volunteers here at Spirit of Matthew 25 and people in the world, there are different versions of Jesus and Christianity out there. There are different ideas about churches and church people. And I really believe that we are all together learning what it means to follow Jesus in the way of love, what it means to offer grace and generosity and kindness. And so it's important for you to hear this. People who have really no connection to Coon Rapids United Methodist Church at all, and maybe not even any church. Some of them go to other churches and that have very different beliefs, or maybe not even any church at all. They are with us learning about love as we love. As we are the light of the world in this community, we are learning that love is everything. The light of love is everything. We're learning this together. And so I want to ask you, we've talked about this so much because of the different beliefs about Jesus and about Christianity and even about Christmas out there. I want to ask you, think carefully about this with me. This Christmas, which Jesus will you honor? How do you think of Jesus? How do you honor Jesus with your life? In your mind, who is this Jesus and what does that mean? I want to dig this up a little bit today because I think it really matters. It really matters. There are so many different versions of Christianity out there. And not just out there, there are different versions of Jesus in our Bible. Let's talk about this today. I mentioned these things last week online, but not in person. So I got to review a little bit because I got to bring the in-person people up. And if you missed last week, I might have really bothered you last week. So I guess I'm going to bother you a little more, but hopefully provide a little bit of sense. Our Bible has 4 different stories of Jesus' life in it. Mark, written around 70 to 75 CE. Note, this is 35 years after Jesus died. That's a long time. Matthew, written even later. Luke, written even after that. And John, written 90 to 100, which Jesus died around 30 CE. So this would be 70 years after Jesus died. These are the four stories that we have in our Bible, and they are very different. And the Jesus that they depict can interpret your life differently. If you only read one of them, you'd get a really incomplete picture, I think. So here's the one that was written second, Matthew 5:14-16. And this one, Jesus is quoted as saying, and this is sort of his opening address to people. He's quoted as saying, "You all are the light of the world. You are. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." I think this is the Jesus that we were following when we decided to just offer grace for the theft. And I think this is the Jesus that absolutely shocked that volunteer who took me by the hand on Friday night. The one that saw, yeah, you got me. But John's gospel writes some very different words. And it's not just writes words about Jesus, but quotes Jesus, saying something very differently. In John's gospel, Jesus never is quoted as saying that you are the light of the world. Instead, in John's gospel, written so much later, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." He says that he is the light of the world. "Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." So let's review this. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus says, quote, "You are the light of the world." You. He doesn't say he's not, but he says you are the light of the world. And in Matthew's gospel, he never says that he is the light of the world. This matters, okay? In John's gospel, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." So of the two, who quoted Jesus correctly? Matthew or John? There's a really big difference between Jesus saying that you are the light of the world at the beginning of his ministry, like his opening sermon, and Jesus saying that he is the light of the world. There's a really big difference between the depiction of Jesus here, and I think it really matters. I'm going to flesh this out a little bit and maybe make some assumptions that are a little wild, but just go with me, okay? If people are the light of the world, according to Matthew's Jesus, then that could mean that we all have light within us already. Do you follow me? Because Matthew's Jesus didn't ask them to repent of their sins before he told them that they were the light of the world. He told them that they were the light of the world already and right now, no matter what. Jesus could be saying, according to Matthew's Jesus, the quotes, even before they know Jesus, these people, ordinary people, have within them the light that will save the world from darkness. If that bothers you a little bit, it may be because the theology you were raised under prioritizes other things in the Bible over this. Pay attention to this, because it actually bothered me until I dug it up, and it doesn't bother me anymore. So I'm going to lead you through why it doesn't bother me anymore, and hopefully help you find some closure on this conflict. Again, Matthew's Jesus might be saying that the light is within you already. And he might be saying, let me show you how to use it. Let me show you what to do with it. However, John's Jesus says something else. If Jesus is the light of the world, according to John's Jesus, then the only way for people to have any light within them is to have Jesus within them. Right now you might be thinking, yep, that's what I was raised to believe. If John quoted Jesus right, then Jesus could be saying that people are full of darkness until the light of Christ lives within them. You might be saying no. Okay, that's me. That's what I was raised to believe. Catch yourself. You're prioritizing John's Jesus over Matthew's Jesus. Do you see how these two gospel writers and the way they quote Jesus quotes, could lead people to very different beliefs. Do you see that? And I took some liberty there. Are you prioritizing one depiction of Jesus in the Bible over another? Are you? Did your belief system under which you were raised teach you a Jesus that left out either Matthew's version or John's version? Is that okay? I'm not really sure. I don't know. So let's just get to the bottom of it. Which gospel is accurate? Who quoted Jesus accurately, Matthew or John? Which one did it right? Here is really a broader question then. Why are there so many differences in the 4 gospel stories in our modern Bible about Jesus? Because this isn't the only difference. There's tons of differences. Are any of them actually accurate? And actually were more gospels written about Jesus than just the 4 that we have in our modern Bible. Of the 4 that made the modern Bible that we hold as Protestants, which is different from other Bibles, why didn't the church leaders just put those 4 gospel stories together to make one story? Well, actually, some people did try to do that, but people thought they left too much out. They couldn't figure out when there were conflicts between what Jesus was saying or doing or where he was going. They couldn't figure out which one to call the truth. And they felt that left an incomplete picture of Jesus. Now, this was around 150 CE. This is obviously 120 years after Jesus died. This guy, Tatian, a Christian theologian from Syria, wrote this thing called the Diatessaron, which means through 4. So it was this whole gospel compilation, taking all 4 gospels and sort of squishing them together to make them work as one story. But it was rejected because it left so many things out, so many stories out, so many parts out. And just for one example, how do you reconcile what happened after Jesus' birth? Because in Matthew's gospel, it has them, I actually right now at this moment, my mind is slipping and I don't remember which is which. One of them has them running off to Egypt and one of them has them just settling somewhere else. How do you reconcile them? So people rejected the mushed together gospel. Let's broaden out further than this too. We were stepping up in the clouds. Maybe the better question is, why do we want the gospel stories or any of the Bible actually to be historically accurate? Okay, this is the bigger issue. And I guess I would say we may want accurate information so we know how to worship or appease God. And that's a belief that we need to think about too. We may think that if we worship God properly and believe the right things, then God will protect us and our family, even into eternity. But God did not protect our bread box from theft. Does that mean we're doing it wrong? No. No. We may also think that if we worship God properly, then we will be full of light, able to save this world from darkness. And if that's what we believe, again, we are favoring John's gospel over the others. Because Mark and Luke, Jesus doesn't say anything about you're the light or he is the light. I'm going to make a big, bold statement here. I don't think it was the intent of any of the gospel writers to give us concrete information about how to worship and what to believe. I don't think there was any intent here to give correct factual dogma. And I don't think that was Jesus' intent either. If it were, wouldn't he have spoken just a little bit more clearly? Wouldn't at least one gospel writer have quoted Jesus telling us what facts to believe? How are we supposed to know what to believe? And why is that our primary concern anyway? Is this really about believing the right things? Well, people have wrestled with this all along. And there was a group of people, around 350 after Jesus died who really tried to put it all together. And they wrote these things called creeds. You probably have heard of them. They were written by church leaders much later. The Apostles' Creed, which was started in 340 and refined all the way through to about 700 CE. The Apostles' Creed is something you may have had to memorize in confirmation. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ. Anyway, the Apostles' Creed. Google it if you don't know it. It's pretty interesting. Or there's another one called the Nicene Creed. And these statements were written by people, church leaders, men, much later than Jesus, to try to say, all right, this is what we have to believe, and this is what we are supposed to believe about Jesus. This is how it works. This is what Christianity is and how it's defined. But here's the thing. Neither of the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed are written in the Bible. Jesus does not give us either of those creeds. They're deduced. And in my opinion, in writing these creeds, they may have prioritized one gospel over another in many ways. For example, in the creeds, it says, born of the Virgin Mary. Well, sure, Matthew and Luke mention Mary and talk about her as a virgin, although we understand more now that that may have just meant young, not necessarily a virgin. But for some reason, Mark and John find no reason to mention that at all. But it's prioritized in the creeds. What do we do about that? What exactly are we supposed to believe? I want to talk a little bit about the emergence of the four Gospels and how they came to be about in the Bible. There was an article written by this guy, L. Michael White. It's actually a PBS special. It's pretty interesting, I think. And he talks a lot about the four Gospels and why they're so different from each other and what we can do with that and where we can be on the other side of knowing that and studying it a little bit. He writes about it this way. He says, the Gospels and the New Testament, of course, have a lot of different, thank you, Michael, have a lot of differences among themselves. But he says that they're all similar because they see Jesus as the pivotal person in everything. He talks about the development of the canon and how there were other Gospels, including Peter, the Gospel of Peter, and as I used as a reference last week, the Gospel of Thomas. And then he references there's some belief of another document called Q that informs things, but other scholars are saying now that that's probably not the case. Either way, he says that in the 2nd and 3rd century, we know that there were many other Gospels that were developed. And actually, I didn't know this till I read this up. We have a charming array of popular kinds of stories of the life of Jesus. Listen, he writes about this, and I found it legit. There's baby Jesus stories, the infancy Gospel of Thomas. There are developing out of popular interest. There are Jesus stories where he's more like a famous figure, almost like a Superman character developing. And many of these Gospels, multiple Gospels, were written in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. And there are other kinds of Gospels that are written too. Some of them are about the stories of Jesus' birth in really, he says, lurid or lucid detail. How miraculous it was, about apostles traveling to other strange lands. Thomas goes to India, Andrew goes to another strange world, and all these other things. There's a ton of gospel stories that were written during that time. And so here's the thing, if there's only one Jesus, how can there be all these different gospels? And why did we choose only 4? What are the true things? How do we know? What is the right answer? Should we be looking for all the right answers? Should we be seeking the truth? I don't think so. He continues, when you look at them all, even the 4 Gospels in the New Testament, you really see that there are rather different portrayals of Jesus that come out of them. If we're looking for facts. I'm going to make another bold statement. I think All four gospel writers are telling stories about Jesus from different vantage points for different audiences with different goals in mind. I think all four gospel writers, yes, thank you, Tammy. Yes, our need for control. I think all four gospel writers had a different purpose in writing their story of Jesus. And it may not have been, except Luke says, to be completely accurate about every detail, because they couldn't have been anyway. They can't possibly have been. They didn't take a camera along when they traveled with Jesus. And this might be why only two of the gospel writers, Matthew and Luke, even mention Jesus' birth story at all. And as I said before, neither Mark or John mention anything about the birth story or about Mary being a virgin, although some think that that's a required belief in order to call yourself a Christian. I think Mark and John had different priorities than even Matthew and Luke, and from each other for sure. For them, and maybe all of them, Jesus' life was more important than the circumstances even around his birth. Both Mark and John felt no need to even talk about Jesus' birth. Ultimately, all the gospel writers wanted us to know that Jesus, his life, his teaching, and his death were so meaningful that he had to be remembered. And it was worth writing it down for all the people who wrote stories about Jesus. The impact of Jesus was so important that they wanted to tell their story. If we're stuck trying to make the Bible accurate, then we're going to miss some really, really wonderful things about Jesus. We're just going to argue about the details of who's right and who's wrong, who's in and who's out, who's allowed to be a pastor and who isn't, what love is, how marriage is defined. Let me go on. If we're stuck trying to make the Bible accurate, then we're going to miss some really wonderful things. And I think actually the Bible people who compiled it choosing 4 Gospels was brilliant, because that tells me that each person's unique perspective and experience matters. And they tried to pick 4 diverse stories. They are really different, and even put them in the Bible. And really, it is our experience together that helps form a clear picture of who Jesus was and who Jesus is even now, and what God intends for us, and what love can do in this world. It is our experience together that tells us how to respond to a theft of the bread box. As we experience more of God's love, truly, we are learning together the impact of Jesus' life. What if Matthew was right about Jesus saying that he was the light of the world? What if Matthew was right when he said that Jesus said that we are the light of the world? What if what Matthew was really thinking, huge liberties here, something like this: yeah, that Jesus guy, he was amazing. He loved everyone, and he showed us how to love everyone. He told us that we were the light of the world, just us average people, and even those who were unclean. That Jesus guy told us we were the light of the world, and he gave us hope. It changed our lives. We will never forget him. He helped us to believe that we could do something about our circumstances, that we could do something about the injustices of the world, that loving our neighbor would actually change things. What if Matthew was right? I bet Matthew's gospel was written by somebody thinking that way. But what if John was right too, written so much later? What if the hindsight that John had about the whole Jesus Way movement caused him to write a quote for Jesus like this: I am the light of the world. What if John was saying Jesus was amazing? Even 70 years later now, people are still talking about him. We're still learning that God is truly love, and love is the way. Back at that time, we underestimated him. It's clear now that Jesus was and is the light of the world. What if John was right too? What if we are the light of the world and so is Jesus? If we don't need accurate information and just want to learn more about who Jesus was and why he still matters, then they can both be right. We can see that Jesus is the light of the world because instead of power, position, and wealth, let me say that word again, wealth, because right now our country is burdened and I will say terrorized by people with massive wealth. Okay? Instead of that, Jesus chose humility. He chose inclusion. And he chose unconditional, generous, sacrificial love. And that's why Jesus is the light of the world. And even now, friends, this is the light that we need. The light that we need in this world is that Jesus light of humility, inclusion, and sacrificial love. And in that same light, Jesus told people who had been pushed down and aside that they mattered and had the power within them to change the world. He told us that we are the light of the world, according to Matthew's quotes. And even now, this is the hope we need. We need the hope that tells us that we can do something about the way this world is. Everyone can. We can. If we just believe that the light is within us and that Jesus' ways are the ways, I really think we can make a difference. Jesus is the light of the world, and so are we. And together, through the light of love, we can change the world. And so this Christmas, I want to ask you, which Jesus will you honor? How will you honor Jesus' life? I'm going to honor Jesus' life, hopefully, by learning that same humility, by learning sacrificial love, by learning generosity, by learning grace and including everyone. That's the Jesus I want to honor this Christmas. The Jesus that loved all the way down and all the way up, no matter what. I have a prayer. If you want to pray with me, you're welcome to. Holy God, even when this world seems dark, we trust that you are light. Lead us with your light, that we may become your light, bringing love into this world. Amen. Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you have a great week this week. Be safe, take care, and remember that love is always the way. Always. And that's the Jesus that I honor this Christmas. Take care. Much love to all of you. Be safe, and I'll see you next Sunday, if not before.